Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the RevRoom podcast. This is episode 20 of season 2. We're really excited as this is our last episode of 2025. And as you are also rounding out the end of this calendar year and rolling into the holidays and then through the new year and coming back strong in early January to address your 2026 plan, we wanted to bring you a compilation of some of the best clips of advice from our past guests this season on how they've been building frameworks, building strategies, implementing some new ways forward on the new B2B marketing playbook. So we know the way that buyers buy today is so different than even like 3 or 4 years ago, especially very different than 8 to 10 years ago. And so we have got to make that shift as marketing leaders. And so what we wanted to do is bring you some of the best ideas that we were able to uncover and were brought from our guests this past season. So we're going to start with Kelly Santos from Intellex, who really worked from her team from transitioning from a content as a campaign and sort of this spray and pray motion, which we all have discovered does not work with our buyers, and put in a solid campaign planning framework with her team, which implements long-lasting campaigns, multi-channel orchestration, multi-threaded. So we're actually attacking the buying committee. And so let's throw it over to Kelly and let her talk a little bit about how she and her team have done that. We came to talk about today, Kelly, and that is campaign planning. And let's start at the before the beginning, I suppose. And like, what really triggered you and your team to go, we need something different. We need to put in a more sort of strategic framework for our campaigns.
Absolutely. So like you said, when you opened up, we pushed out content that we viewed as a campaign. So we would create this really great piece of content. It could be a piece of research. It could be a white paper. And we would wrap different activities around that specific piece of content. And that it didn't not work for us. It worked to an extent. But we realized over time as we would push out this piece of content and then we'd move on to the next thing and we wouldn't really go back and optimize or look at it. And so after a while, it started to feel a little bit exhausting to continually push out content, but then not really go back and revisit it. And so that's what caused us to pause and say, are we actually approaching this in the most helpful way for our prospects? Are they getting what they need? Are they getting the value out of what we're creating? Are we differentiating ourselves with our message? Or are we just pushing out content that, helpful, but isn't really driving our mission and isn't really assisting customers through their journey? So we didn't really know where customers were in their journey. We didn't know if they wanted more awareness content or bottom of funnel decision-making content. We just kind of pushed it out and spray and pray and see what we got into our net. And so that's what really prompted us to say, ooh, maybe we could do this a little bit smarter and actually create a true campaign with a singular message, all of these different activities underneath it, and just do it in a different way, in a true campaign fashion. I think sometimes we get so busy in what we're doing is that we're doing a lot of activities and it felt really good and we were, checking things off the list, but we were able to sit back and say, okay, is this the best use of our time? And are we truly helping our customers or prospective customers with the different content that we're pushing out? So it was a good moment for us to step back and really think about what we wanted to do when it came to campaign planning and what we needed to do differently for the campaign, but also as a team.
Mhm. I think you have a lot of pain points that you are experiencing that. Man, I talked to so many people and listened to a lot of other podcasts or follow on LinkedIn. Like so many people struggle with this problem. And it really centers around that. And I've led teams right through this as well as like all the content as a campaign
Mhm.
sort of marketing. But to your point, like I don't know if it's a badge of honor we wear as marketers or what it really ends up becoming, but that badge of busyness
Mhm.
really we get wrapped up around. And I think some of that comes from like the MQL engine, right?
For
Like
sure,
having to
yeah.
just drive MQLs constantly. And our friend Carrie Cunningham calls it the MQL industrial complex, right? And all of those things that sort of center around that. But at the end of the day, we're really just churning and churning and churning. It's creating burnout for people.
Yeah.
It's also maybe not the best for our prospects and customers and meeting them where they're at in their journey. And I think like it's really kind of old school, right? The way we're looking at it. And I really try to encourage people to think bigger about what they're doing. So when you sort of realize this, I'm like, man, we need to do something different. what kind of steps did you take? What did you end up doing? And like what brought Inverta into the mix to help you with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, and the thing that was difficult too is that we were hitting our goals. So it wasn't that
Mm,
we were seeing MQLs come in, we had our pipeline number that we were targeting, so we were doing okay. So when you think of just the saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
that's right.
It was
Mhm.
tough for us to say, well, can we actually it was more in the spirit of continuous improvement than this is broken and we need to fix it. So
Mm,
I think
mhm.
going in with that mindset definitely helped for the team to feel motivated to come together and work on something. This is just the next evolution of our campaign planning process. It's not broken. So I think that was very motivating for the team. So we worked with Inverta and the team to really go through a campaign planning process and truly define across the entire team, really co-create this campaign plan together. How are we actually going to plan a campaign? We needed to come together and figure that out because we also have embarked on account-based everything, account-based marketing. And so we knew that in order to do that really well, we had to set the foundation from a campaign standpoint first. If we didn't know how to put together a campaign, we were not going to be successful at putting together an ABM campaign. So one of the things that we did is we knew we had to have all of these different functions come together and hold each other accountable on where is the handoff, who's managing what, and really truly define what our RACI is. That was probably one of our biggest hindrances in the past and why we were so content driven is because we were primarily the demand gen team churning out all of these different pieces of content, but we knew we needed inputs from other teams. And we just didn't have the formality of a RACI to say, okay, you now need to give us this, and you now need to give us that. And now here's the handoff. So defining the RACI was vital in what we were doing. So
Mm,
that process was, met with the Inverted team. We worked with Danielle, who walked us through an entire RACI, but it wasn't so prescriptive that the team didn't feel like they were also creating it together. They had a voice in everything. So we had benchmark best practices, say that 3 times fast,
yeah.
from Inverta that said, this is typically what we recommend, but does it work for your organization? Every org is different. Every team is built
Yeah.
differently. So that was really important. And the team had their voice into, well, I think it makes sense if so-and-so's team does X and here's the handoff or what have you. So that was really important. That was truly the first critical step in making sure we could actually pull together a campaign is really put together that RACI. From there, we went through all the different steps that we would need to take. So when it comes to the value prop, the messaging house, putting together different pieces of different offers, high value offers, making sure we knew the buyer's journey, making sure we had the right content to map to it. So all of these checkpoints were part of that campaign planning process document. And so now we live and die by this document is from start to finish. Okay, open it up. What are the objectives? What are the goals, the KPIs that we're trying to hit? That will define the type of campaign that we're really looking for. Then we'll go all the way through to the channel execution and activation to make sure we're meeting these folks where they're active within different marketing channels.
Yeah, it was really fun talking to Kelly about the work that she's done with her team, even in conjunction with the Inverta team as well. They've really found a lot of success. All right, so the next clip that I wanted to share with you is with our friends Daryl Alfonso and Mike Rizzo, who were on the show earlier this year and talking about the evolution of the MOPS team from a order taker, button pusher to a strategic partner for CMOs and marketing leaders and how that takes place. So Mike and Daryl in this clip are talking a little bit about how they start planning how they're going to become that strategic partner. Like, what does it take and what do you need to know in order to start to develop the implementation ideas and the tactics in which you want to bring to bear in order to make that strategy partnership with your marketing leaders? And they talk about a listening tour. So we'll throw it over to them and let them talk about that.
I mean, I think now is a great time at the start of the year to take an audit of what your current landscape looks like from a people. So we'll just sort of orient ourselves to people, process, and technology. So just like survey the landscape of who currently is on your team, and I would highly recommend that you reach out to a handful of folks that are from the community or within the broader network who look similar or look like they work for an organization that could be similar to yours, and ask them for what their organization structure and orientation looks like as they relate to other teams. I would highly, highly recommend that. I know Daryl and I have done that a number of times in our career where we've reached out to our peers to just try to understand, hey, what are you working on? Who do you report to? What are your sort of objectives for the year? Obviously, nothing proprietary usually gets shared in those things, right? It's really structural stuff.
Sure.
And it's a great time for you to audit. Okay, well, who's on your team and what are you looking to achieve? Go down. I know it's a little bit of a shameless plug, but go download the State of the MoPro research from last year to understand how teams are being measured and compensated and what they look like at different organization levels. And then survey your landscape on what are the processes you have in place for campaign operations and how to execute go-to-market. What process do you have in place for a team to be able to reach you that you don't normally get a chance to interact with? And what is your process to be able to interact with them? And if one doesn't exist, start to develop that architecture for how to create that alignment. And then, of course, that all sort of trickled down to the technology piece, which is audit your tech stack. Look for, the tools that are sort of lackluster, maybe redundant. You can absolutely impact your organization really quickly by either adopting technology more and creating a plan to drive more success with, or ROI, I guess, if you want to use another acronym, from the tools that you already have in your stack, or, get rid of the bloat. There's a lot of redundancy a lot of the time. And this is a great time for you to try to understand, is anybody actually using this thing? Hot tip, take away access and see who complains. And it'll be like, oh, if nobody complains, nobody's using it.
Yeah.
So I've done that before. But don't do it if you really think you're going to piss somebody off.
Yeah. Daryl, anything to add there? Like, what would you recommend? You haven't been at Indeed for very long. And just curious about, like, what would you do as a leader? What would you suggest people do, sort of, if they just want to start making this change from order taker to strategic business partner?
Yeah, it's similar to what Mike said, and so there's this thing that I recommend doing called a listening tour. You go around, you go to each of the key partners, leaders, and then you're trying to figure out what their goals are, what their biggest pain points are. And then you have to list them all out. And it's interesting. At a small org, this can be done in like a week. But in a really large organization, it could take over a month, which is crazy. And then what you're going to do is you're going to list all of those things out, and you go through a mapping exercise to understand which projects, platforms, and overall processes that you own, control, or influence that can actually support either helping achieve a goal or removing a blocker. And there's various methods that you can do. Again, like, none of this is secret, but there's different ways that you can figure out, okay, out of the different priorities that we've listed out, which one should we work on? Like, which one will make the most difference? I'm a big fan of the RACI methodology of prioritization. It stands for reach, impact, confidence, and effort. And you can rank all of those and give it a score. And then what you're going to be working with is you're going to be working with a prioritized list that's scored on multiple dimensions. And those things are really wonderful to do too, especially when you might get pushed and saying like, hey, your roadmap or your projects are subjective. No, they're not. They're based on these multiple factors, and that's the other thing that I think is really interesting about business. It's never like simplified down to one thing. It's much, much more nuanced than that. Sure. You can never just say it's all about revenue. It's all about sales. It's all about this. It's actually about multiple things that tend to go together, which is super interesting. And then, so once all of that's complete, my recommendation is to actually do the listening tour in reverse, like the exact same listening tour, but this time you present how your work is going to help people achieve their goals. And it's the times that I've done that, it's been such a wonderful experience in And you can just see, I think, people's eyes light up, because even now, so many people don't know what marketing ops does or what ops does in general. They just think it just includes everything. Like it's just all the behind the scenes stuff. So when they see their work actually mapped to things that people care about, it's a really big difference maker. And my guess is once you start doing that, once ops people start to approach their work in this way, they're going to be invited into the strategic meetings, at the revenue table, at the budget meetings. They're going to be invited into all these things that they weren't before, because you're finally showing, hey, we are strategic and we are critical, and this is how we're driving impact for the business.
Well, Mike and Daryl have some great ideas there. Hope you can use some of that. And honestly, that listening tour is so great for anybody new coming into an organization. Go around, ask some questions, be curious. And even if you've been at an organization for a long time, it's okay. You can ask the questions even then and just stay curious in your job. I think curious marketers make really dangerous marketers and successful ones long term. Okay, so we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about AI and its use in marketing. And so the next clip I'm going to share with you is with the AI practice lead here at Inverta, Brian Schmid, who is a regular on our podcast and fantastic if you haven't seen some of his content. And then also James Lamberti, who is from Georgian. They're a PE firm who works with a lot of B2B SaaS companies. And the clip that they are going to talk to here is how we do content production at scale utilizing AI and workflows. And the episode that they were on was fantastic. So I would really encourage you to go and listen to the whole thing and really think about, do I need a content engineer on my team? This is a concept they talk about. So let's listen.
Yeah, you're talking about a content engineering role. I mean, we'll talk about the second bit at a more basic level. We did start off with a simpler solution, and that's why we have two flavors. The N8N instance was one we evolved to. We were able to do that because we have an AI lab. So I literally had a content engineer assigned to help me, right? And I think we'll want to double click Brian on that role, and maybe I'll toss it back to you to describe that role and the importance of that role to solve for the problem you just described. But absent of having that individual available to you, a lot of these workflow capability tools are really straightforward and simple. N8N is one of the most complex. I mean, it's literally like your and the API feeds into it. Airflow is much simpler and much more friendly and built for a marketing team. So there is that option. There's also the option to not use any of the Airflow tools, but simply just have a manual version of your own process today.
Yeah.
The agents that you need in a systemized way. The key, in my opinion, there is for the quality to be where it needs to be, using two things. Number one, developing a standardized, consistent output. In our case, we decided to templatize a blog, right? So that the end goal of your production is a consistent outcome, consistent format to that asset, to that content piece. Most people do this, but a lot actually do not. Every blog is bespoke, and content production playbook, and for the use of agents, I think having a really consistent target outcome templatized really helps you. And by the way, I think it's maybe better marketing because the people begin to be familiar with how you structure your conversation. And that's one thing. The other thing that I think is super, super important is, where do you source your data? As a content marketer, you've created amazing content. It lives, in Google Drive, and it lives all over the place. You can now pretty easily point your agent at a bunch of disparate locations and pull it in to create great content that's truly you. It's your content. We haven't even yet talked about going to the open web or open source and getting augmentation. It's really just the pain of all this content being strewn all over your organization without any consistent output. Even without the sophistication of the content production playbook, that V1, I think, is how I might address, your question, Brian. And then we can talk about how you get to a much more sophisticated place. And content engineer, I'll kind of turn it back over to you.
What I actually love about that is starting with that V1 solves one of the other, not issues, but steps that I think people have to take here, which is before you even get to the concept of automation, like you have to make sure those prompts work. Otherwise,
Yes.
you are just automating bad prompts and you're going to get bad content. So that version 1, where we're going to really dial in those agents and you're going to use them manually, the huge benefit that I see there is you are going to be very familiar with the output of each and every one of those agents. You're going to understand how to test them, make sure they're doing exactly what they need to do. Your team's going to get more familiar with how to use it. Even if you already know your end goal is, no, we want to automate this. Like, I still think that's a great place to start. You're going to have to do it to test and develop all those prompts anyway to make sure they're giving you the consistent output that you want. So no, I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the risk here is that we still end up in this. The risk with that kind of baseline, which I just described, is you still end up with individual acts of content creation. So I think it's really important that teams come together and create scaled, trained, share best practices, standardized. Right? Yeah. We just an afternoon work session. How are we all going to do this together? Or we're going to share agents. We're going to share target outs. We're going to share prompts. We're going to point to the same data assets. If we want to pull in third-party attribution from the open web, let's make sure we agree on what sources suit our brand, our our audience. And then the other thing that, regardless of how sophisticated you are, humans are always in the loop.
Yep.
Idea of programmatic content we have seen does not work, right? You can use the content production playbook in our work, and it is what we're calling it, to get way more efficient, but you need to end up putting that content in the hands of an editor, like you always have. Yeah. Make sure it doesn't sound like a robot,
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, James, just going back to what you were saying about the workflow itself. And Brian, you and I've had these conversations even about our own internal sort of workflows and trying to automate some of our processes and then working with customers to do the same is, like, don't start with automation, start with the workflow. And then you can think about, okay, what parts of this workflow can we automate? Because if you start with automation first, now you're maybe shoehorning something in, square peg, round hole kind of a thing. But you also may just get to a point where you get stuck because we can't really automate that part. So, but do the workflow part first and sort of identify the areas where you can start to do automation.
Yeah. Like, I think it's good to remember the goal is not automation. The goal is quality content at scale. Some of that you're going to automate for sure. But you have to recognize, Jens, like you said, where do people need to be in the loop? Is it the beginning at the end? Is it somewhere in the middle? And I think documenting your workflow, exactly how you go about checking for brand consistency, for style consistency, how you get feedback from product marketing or sales or buyers potentially. I think documenting that out and figuring out exactly where can we automate, where does it make sense, works. James, you mentioned the concept of we don't want these individual acts of marketing or of content creation. So documenting the workflow helps with that. But for teams who aren't familiar and who are just, we have a quote unquote consistent way of prompting, a good place even to start, make sure that you are sharing. If you use Microsoft Copilot, for example, make sure you've built your content creation agents as literal agents in Copilot and share them with your team. Make sure that they are using the same centralized capabilities. You can do that with Gemini's gems as well. If you're on ChatGPT, make a custom GPT and share it. Like, there are ways to drive consistency within your team that even if you're not automating, you should be doing. If you start there, you've got something to work from when it does come time to automate this playbook. You've already got a series of instructions or prompts that can be leveraged that you know your team's having success with.
All right. Thanks, Brian and James. That's a great clip. And like I said, a really great episode. Okay, we're going to talk about some of the tension that is happening in marketing today. And that is go generate MQLs. Okay. We all know that there's a lot of CEOs and leaders in businesses who are still asking for that as the metric and really the immediate impact that marketing can have. And we invited Carrie Cunningham, our friend from Sixth Sense, and Kathy Mackey, who is the co-founder at Inverta. They were on the episode probably mid-year, like this summer. And what they were talking about is like the new metrics that marketers need to be thinking about. And one of the things we discussed was this sort of fallacy that marketers can go make an impact on this quarter's pipeline, especially in a longer sales cycle, B2B, complex buying motion. That's just unrealistic. And so we need to be able to speak to that as marketing leaders with our boards, with our leadership teams, and be able to really position marketing in the right way as a more long tail partner, strategic partner with the business and growth. And just, shoving money at us in Q4 and saying, we need pipeline to close this year is probably not realistic. And so there's Carrie and Kathy talk a little bit about how to address that situation and the realities of that.
I think it starts with the data. Like you have got to, I think also CMOs are very isolated. This is one thing the report brought up. What relationships do you have? As we all know, we've worked on one with sales, you've worked on with the CIO, you've worked on the one with the CFO. Like, the CFO, they probably don't right now. And so what are those other C-level people that you need to have a relationship with and be able to explain one-on-one what it is you're breaking and having a story to tell? And part of that gets into, and it's not on this topic, marketers, I find CMOs, because we've been this MQL industrial complex, we've got away from really good planning. Like Rachel, you've heard me say, people don't learn how to plan in school. It's not a class you take, Planning 101.
No.
And so how do you start to connect your business goals to your marketing strategy, this actual outcome, and then tie that to budget? And we really don't have good systems for doing it. And so I think marketers, leadership struggles with that. So you're always using all these other proxies to try to show your value. And you really don't come across as a good business person. You're supposed to be a steward of that budget. We're giving you money. Tell me how. A lot of I've seen CMOs, they think it's great to give money back at the end of the year. No, it's not. Because they gave you money to generate X amount of revenue. If you didn't generate that revenue, like they don't see that as a good thing. Like you give me money back. It's like, well, you didn't accomplish your goals. I gave you this pile of money and you couldn't even manage it to do it.
Yeah. I told a couple of friends recently that have sort of gone into some leadership roles in marketing, and what I've recommended to them is like, you first of all, make a relationship, build a relationship with your CFO, understand what's important to them, and learn how to speak their language. But like they own the purse strings, and they probably got the biggest like influence over the CEO, right?
Yeah.
And so you need to have that relationship as a CMO or a VP of demand, or whatever leadership role you're in. That's a really important connection to make, and again, speak their language, understand what's important to them.
There's a very specific barrier. It's an idea that is a barrier. And this also is something that is a symptom of the MQL industrial complex. And that is the concept of the time lag between what marketing does and when the result is produced.
Yeah.
So, it even happens here at Sixth Sense where we know better, but you constantly hear marketers being asked to contribute to pipeline this quarter. We're down this quarter, marketing, what can you do?
Yes.
Even in companies where what they sell costs $500,000 and takes a year and a half to buy. And, the answer should be, in a perfect world, nothing. I can't do anything. It's too late for that. What I was doing to help with this quarter's pipeline was 2 quarters ago, 3 quarters ago. That's how marketing works. And so I think the best time to have that, one, CFOs understand that if you describe the problem and talk about it and lay it out. But if you have to start saying that in the moment where somebody's coming to ask you to contribute to this quarter, One, you're probably not going to do it. If you do say it, you're going to get fired. It's that can't be when the conversation happens. So this has to be a conversation that is ongoing. If you have a time where things are going well, everybody's making their numbers, a great time to start having a conversation about how does it actually work? And how long is that buying cycle? And when does marketing actually contribute to whether we're going to be getting deals? Because it isn't this week. It's a while ago. And that fundamental misunderstanding is a huge part of the tension between marketers and CFOs and marketers and sales. Why can't you just do something and produce buyers? Well, okay. Because it takes a minute.
Well, yeah, Rachel, one of my favorite CMOs, I had him talk to Carrie just for this. We're supposed to do some paper on it. But this is like his third time being a CMO, and he's learned. The day he had one of his best analysts, they start collecting this data. And now he's been in the role over 2 years now, maybe longer. He knows now for when they give money, 18 months later, it pops out the other side. Because he was done the same thing, fourth quarter. Oh, I'll give you $1 million. What can you do? And really, nothing at that point, really. Nothing, unless you want to pay some people that, hey, I'll give you $100,000 to close that $1 million deal.
Right.
I mean, like, what are you supposed to? But he really has it down now. So, and he's started to educate them. And now they know they need to invest, give him money now if they want to see. But that's a hard thing to really sell without the data. And it took him this long to have the data. And he wasn't sure either.
You can look in your data to see when companies were on your website and then how that traffic was over time and all of that. You could see all of that time in your data. So, what this fella that Kathy's talking about did, I think is perfect. Take the research that says, here's what it looks like everywhere. Then go find that in your own data and say, and here's what it looks like in our particular case. And so this is how the world works, right? And now what we have to do is align ourselves to how the world works, and maybe try to improve how the world works a little bit, but understand that, you're a factor in how, the other thing we can talk about is another MQL industrial complex thing is the idea of moving buyers through the funnel. It doesn't work that way at all, and, if you're listening to this in your company, think about yourself as a buyer. When did anybody ever move you through something, anything? You've got enough trouble trying to keep things together in your organization, get people moving forward, get all of those things to happen. What you need is enablement, the right information, the right content in a form that people can consume, that has messages for the CFO and all of that they understand. You need help with that, but nobody's moving you through their funnel. It's just not how it works. And we need to drop that idea altogether.
All right. Thanks for that, Kathy and Carrie. And I think it's really important to think through how you have that conversation proactively as a marketer with your leadership so that you don't get into that position in the first place. Let's make sure we're talking about marketing in the right way and not just order takers and tactic generating promotional factories, as I've been talking about. We're not a promotional factory. We're a strategic growth partner with the business, and we have to start reframing in that way. Okay, speaking of, our friend Brittany Dawson was on the podcast earlier this year, and she is a whiz at customer marketing, which is, we know, an area a lot of B2B firms don't really focus on. How do we grow our current customer base in a strategic way? And we just rely on and lean on our sales teams or account reps to do those sorts of things. And Brittany has done a great job with her team in building a motion and a strategy in how they actually go and do customer advocacy, customer growth, and have seen really great results from that. So let's listen in on Brittany's story. Can you talk a little bit about how you're approaching lifecycle marketing? You mentioned that. And what does that look like at AlphaSense today? Or, and how is that maybe different than what you've looked at before?
Yeah. So the last 2 customer marketing jobs I've had, within the first 6 months, you're building a customer journey. You're doing interviews across the organization, including product, CS, who engages with customers, what are they doing, and what stages, what are the friction points. And so that's where we started, is just getting the state of the state. And if not alone, I'm sure I'm not alone in this scenario, but there were a lot of ad hoc. It depends. The customer journey quickly gets very complicated. So our approach recently here at AlphaSense in the last year and a half, starting with trial and just starting at the beginning of the journey and doing a very detailed map there. And so now we're building onto the retention plays and the renewal playbooks and really kind of just taking it stage by stage at this point because it does get complicated. And breaking it down there that way has been very successful for us.
Yeah. What sorts of things are you doing? You talked about this or those renewal and retention campaigns, and we talked on previously about having a work back strategy from a renewal date and those sorts of things. And not that people don't have them, but I have been and worked with lots of customers who don't think about it that way and have that sort of strategy up front. They almost are more reactive to, oh my gosh, the renewal date's coming. What are we going to do? Can you just give some examples of some of the things that you're doing when you think about that? I mean, as overarching as the life cycle piece that you just talked about, but some of those really specific points in time during the life cycle. What are some of the things that you're doing? What are the strategies that you're putting in place there?
Yeah, I think the first one that comes to mind for me is kind of working very closely with the CS team and understanding what their current renewal playbook looks like. So this past year, we were working on an initiative to help with efficiency on the account management side. So how can we, digitally support some of the customers rather than having a one-to-one AM assignment? How can we help with a one to many customers? We called it our Tech Touch initiative and basically it's a digital renewal initiative. And they're looking at the life cycle, and we had adoption standpoint. So at any point, what is the baseline adoption? What should that look like? And then from there, create a low adoption playbook, a moderate adoption playbook, and a high adoption playbook to understand how can we ensure if they're not going to have an account manager outreaching to them as regularly as some of our higher ARR customers, how can we create content that's relevant to them based on the usage that they have? And then from there, we also created, based on the usage that they have, what are the notifications for renewal coming up? And there are some levers within that of 90 days before renewal, what does a low usage renewal playbook look like? And building very custom messaging from that. There was a queue base, so we do have other account managers managing those accounts if there are some major red flags or they do want to meet and engage. But we did have that support within the CS tool where we created the playbooks that could kind of have those levers before that contract date actually happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think something you talked about just early on in that explanation, all the tactical stuff that's awesome. I'm sure those are great tidbits for people, but a big piece of what I know you are sort of staked your career growth on is that cross-functional sort of partnership with CS and sales and others across the organization. How are you building those relationships? How do you find it effective? What do you find effective in order to build relationships like that across the organization from a customer marketing lens?
Yeah, I think it's, the minute you get into that role, having those one-on-one introductory conversations and knowing here's my mission, what's your mission? How do we partner and align on those key missions that you may have? And what are your key KPIs? And how can I support your KPIs? And just having that frequent engagement, the classic have biweekly touch points or monthly touch points. At this point, we have I think it's every 3 weeks we're meeting with CS leaders to give them details on programs that will help their teams reach their goals, right? AMs are really focused on their renewals, their growth, their adoption. Okay, what are we doing as customer marketers to help that? What are we doing to help identify advocates and help them collect quotes so that they can put those into QBRs? So always continuing to communicate how you are helping their KPIs. And if you're not getting that information, just ask. People love to answer questions, right? Love to tell you about what they do. So that's at the leadership level, but I think also our traditional customer advocates, right? Marketers, we have to have that one-on-one relationship as well with the AM. So there is a top down and a bottom up approach. And so having those relationships with account managers to understand what their day-to-day looks like is really important as well. Because, we still have the best practice if you reach out to a customer for speaking engagement or a case study or quote approval, what have you. You want that account manager's buy-in. So let them know that you want them to be a key partner in all of that. So in the short, I think there's large strategic initiatives that you want to have that leadership buy-in and that leadership trust. But then there's also the day-to-day, like human-centric driven strategy, just to really connect with others across the team, that they know that you're a resource, that you're also engaging with customers is important.
Thanks, Brittany. That's a great story. We've really got to lean into customer marketing to help with our NRR numbers. That I think that number and that data point is going to be so crucial and so important for B2B businesses going forward. It's going to be an area where people focus on more. That's one of my predictions for 2026. Okay, here's the question. We have the new playbook that we're trying to implement, and that's really focused on, can we shift from focus on MQLs to more building out the buying committee and really starting to get engagement and get in front of the multitude of individuals who are on the buying committee. We know that can be upwards of 10 to 15 to 20 people, depending on the complexity of a sale and even the size of your ACV. So we had Jeremy Schwartz on from Palo Alto earlier this year, and he says, yes, you could absolutely do this at scale in a big enterprise company. And so let's listen in a little bit on how they've implemented some pilots there at Palo Alto to implement this more focus on the buying committee.
We're a traditional org that still has a somewhat separated marketing and sales team. We in marketing are more responsible for pipeline than in the past. We're more concerned with what's happening with the opportunity, progression. But it's still, even after a year and a half of doing this, we're just now starting to transform into having marketing metrics that are focused on buying groups.
Sure.
Because we're big enough more. But
that's a hard shift.
I'm jumping ahead, but we are big enough now that we're seeing that. But that's why we did start with the BDRs and the sales teams, because we knew that we had to have somewhere, an endpoint. Because the idea was building an opportunity that had buying groups on them. And if we had no motion for that, it would dead end with single MQLs, just rebounding back to the nurture.
Yeah, and I don't know how big your BDR team. I imagine you've got a good chunk of individuals. Did you run the pilots with, was every BDR involved in the pilots? You said every product and most of your theaters, right?
Yeah, no, it was not.
Or is it just a handful of your
It was
BDRs?
limited teams,
Okay.
so we had limited teams in each theater that represented different segments and different product groups. So we had coverage, but we had some teams that, like I said, and this is with anything, any adoption of change in an organization, think about the iPhone. You have a friend who goes out and waits in line to buy that phone the first day. If you're like me, you wait maybe a month, right? You wait and see if you get a month, 2 months, let the kinks get worked out by someone else. And then there's the third group that's like, I'll get it 2 years down the road when my current phone breaks. And so, that was the same way with the BDRs. The ones that got it, because what we would say to them is, well, you get comped on creating the opportunity and setting the meeting. And don't you also get comped? Part of your comp is on if the deal closes. And they're like, oh, yes. I'm like, so by doing buying groups, you stand a better chance of a deal you create closing. And they're like, oh, okay. Yeah. So they, talk around, you're not getting comped for doing research and demand base. Well, if you do, and we also saw things like they would create the meeting, not with the original MQL, but with one of these people that they farmed out of demand base. And that was really cool too, is that all this evidence was starting to stack up, right? And so we ran this for a quarter. Like I said, we probably had our BDR org is, I want to say, it varies between 200 and 300 globally. So it's not giant, but it's a pretty decent size. For an org our size, it's probably a little undersized even, but it's a pretty big size. We had maybe globally 10% of that, maybe 20 to 30 or 40 people at the most. And some people dropped out because they were like, oh, it's too much work for me. But we did that for a quarter. And at the end of the quarter, every metric was up. Every single metric was up into the right. Opportunity creation, moving out of omitted, like the seller took the meeting and it moved out of omitted into pipeline. And one of the reasons for that was because the opportunities were suddenly much more interesting to the sellers. Instead of a meeting with a networking admin that they could care less about, well, you have a meeting with his boss and his boss also. So there's 3 people on a meeting, not one. And there are guys who can actually have a conversation and maybe make a decision. And so they would suddenly take more of those meetings and not ignore the BDR created ops. They would suddenly move them into pipeline, which was awesome, into stage 1. And people were like, oh my gosh. And we saw that it progressed also. We saw a couple of deals that closed and it looked anecdotally like they were closing more, but it was in a quarter. Our sales cycle is large. So it was anecdotal at best there, but all this evidence was showing, and the deal sizes were bigger too. So we were like, wow, this is amazing. So we went back to our VP.
Yeah.
And we said, here's the results. Can we talk to our CMO now? And he goes, yeah, let's get some time with him. So we got some time and we're a big org. Sometimes it's hard to get time with the CMO. So we put together a great deck and we showed him, and it was almost the same thing. He looked at it and he goes, this is really interesting. Like I said, what Terry says, oh, that's cute. He says, but it seems small. Like we put the conversion rates, which were all high, but the numbers, the pipeline numbers, he was, if it's not $100 million, don't bring it to my attention. I'm like, okay, whatever, So we said, all right. He says, but it's interesting. So we went back and we went to our data science team. And this is something else I advise people to do, is we extrapolated that data against the previous year, 4 quarters worth of actuals. And we were like, the pipeline, the revenue. And we went back to our CMO and we said, hey, just so you know, we took your advice and we thought about that. And we wanted to let you know that we ran this, and you didn't even focus on pipeline. We said, if this had been applied last year, it would have been a 13% increase in revenue for the company. And you can imagine that number at a company of our size, what 13% revenue is, right? And suddenly he was like, oh, okay. He goes, do more of that. So our CMO said, do more of that now. Okay. And that was a really exciting moment, because now, he still wasn't saying I'll be your executive sponsor or anything like that, but he liked it enough to tell us, do more of that, come back to me in another quarter. And so that's where we ended our first phase of our pilot. So it took us that took us all 6 months, because it was about 3 months of planning, and it was about 3 months. That first pilot was 3 months. And it was, so that first 6 months, we went to Forrester, I think it was June, beginning of June of 23. And this was the end of November of 23. So 6 months later, that's where we.
You guys moved fast.
It was fast. It was fast because we kept it small and very organic. And I come back to that again.
Yeah.
It's really important to, if this could be planned from the top, and I'm not saying it shouldn't, but I found tremendous results. Even if I had an executive sponsor and I was going to do this, now I might work on the marketing and the sales side at the same time and try and accelerate both sides to get their motion going. But I'm a small team in marketing operations. I call it guerrilla marketing. I mean, that's what we've been doing for the last year and a half. And, again, we're at scale now where the numbers that we're seeing, we're presenting in our QBRs now to our CMO. Yeah. So it's gotten to it's no longer cute. And I'll get to that next 6 months, but it was such an amazing experience. And we saw this works. We were telling Forrester was amazed, because, they have this concept and they've worked with other teams, but I don't think they worked with anyone of the scale of our size to try to make this transformation. Yeah. They were blown away, and they kept giving us, we were partnered with them on giving us tremendous guidance. So, I think that's what my advice for people, comes back to the first question you asked me. My advice for people who want to get started with this is, you have to understand what you're trying to do. What's your blue sky goal, of course? And I know where we're trying to get. We want to press a button and have a buying group created into an opportunity and activated it across the marketing and sales funnels. That's what we're working on now, but it's hard to get there. So start with that people, the processes, the systems are last. You haven't even heard me talk about the systems yet. So we did people and processes for that first 6 months. And then we started to think about what we would need to do from systems. Now that we saw people doing it manually, how would we automate and optimize that process? But at this point, the results were really exciting. And so that's the key, I would say, is that you've got to understand the people, processes, and the systems. You've got to know what your long-term goal is, but what is the short-term steps you want to try and take? We knew we had to understand these processes, get your buying group in order. I've talked to plenty of people in my travels and talking about this where they don't have an identified buying group. And even me telling them, mine your own data, and they're like, wow, okay. So that's the first place. If you can get executive sponsorship, if you have if you're a director or a VP and you have the ear of your CMO, you should talk to the CMO and see if you can get executive buy-in from the ground floor up.
Yeah.
But if you can't, you could do it as organically. It can be done. It just takes a little longer, and it's harder when but it's also sometimes it's harder, sometimes it's easier, because when you have a small team, you can move pretty quickly.
That great story from Jeremy, and it just keeps getting better every time I see him on LinkedIn or I talk to him. They're just getting better and better results from this shift. And I love that the CMO sort of started out as a skeptic, and as they built more and more data points, the convincing is in the data. So you can have a great point of view, but the data is really what provides the proof of value. And I love what they're doing there. All right, let's switch and get to a little bit more tactical. We hosted a series this summer on underutilized marketing channels. And one of the areas that we focused on was direct mail. And, I think with people moving to more remote work, that kind of went by the wayside for a while. We got away from gifting and really thinking about how we can personalize the experience for our buyers and our customers. So we had Julie Wiedup on from Acrolis, and they are utilizing AI tools plus Sendoso and really strategic, bespoke direct mail gifting in their business that has really helped them take off and grow. Let's listen in on their story.
So we are running what we call our FinTech campaign, and it's really a two-prong approach. So what we want to do is reach the right people at the right time with precisely the right messaging. And in order to do that, you have to put some sort of carrot out there. So the first approach is more to like high intent in market accounts and individuals. And we measure that through our ABM platform. We use 6 Sense. We push those audiences out of 6 Sense into the various pieces of our MarTech stack. And within that, we will, our audience, the FinTech audience, and the buyers within the FinTech companies that we're selling to and the mortgage tech companies that we're selling to, they like the finer things in life, right? Like that's the way that I put. They're very tech forward, and you can't send them a $10, gift card. You have to send something that will pique their interest. So we build ABM programs, and a part of that is like a Yeti cooler. It's like the big $300 Yeti cooler that you typically, don't have that. You have the large one, the small one. And then things like really nice Yeti tumblers. Like, I swear this is not an endorsement for Yeti, but our audience loves Yeti. I mean, we actually have custom color Yeti mug for one of our events, and every year we bring a different color, and it gets so much traction.
That's cool.
But like some of like the Apple AirPods that you're seeing all over the place, we actually do like the more expensive version. We do the Beats, we do the TheRevRoom. So we put together some like really cool, I'd say higher value items to pull them in. But we're doing this to the decision makers within these FinTech companies. And because our ACV is not small, right? Like we're not under $5,000, where it's hard to really, stand up a program where you're giving a $300, $400, $500 gift. We're finding that these are really great carrots to draw people in. But I say that with a caveat, they're very high intent accounts. Like there was a Trust Radius thing the other day that I saw that, most B2B buyers are shortlisting 1 to 5 different vendors. And before they even reach out to you, like something like 80% of them have already made their decision who they want to buy from. They're kind of just dating you, during the evaluation process. So we want to get to them right when they're shortlisting Acrolis. Like right there is our Goldilocks zone. And we're doing a really good job of doing that. So with the FinTech audience, we're kind of surprising and delighting, very warm prospects. The other side of it, so the two-prong approach is we've cultivated and assembled what we call Acro swag. So we put Grow in front of everything because we're Acrolis. And we put together the Acro Swag bundle that's really geared for this audience. Again, it's going to have like golf swag. Like we're not chintzy when it comes to the golf balls. We're going to do their gosh, what is it? Like the title of Pro
like
V1.
the Pro V1s.
Yeah. The Pro V1, the really nice JBL speaker that's going to clip on a golf bag. Again, the Yeti tumbler. So we're putting together something that we know will be appreciating you. The last thing you want to do is just be a swag cannon and just shove everything out there, do something generic. We try to make it memorable. So every single customer that signs with us is getting an Acro Swag box, and it's very bespoke to our particular audience. We find that, number one, it's going to increase brand loyalty. It's going to help with upsells and cross-sells. But more importantly, the surprise and delight factor. You get this in the mail. You weren't expecting it. You get to open up the package from Acrolis, and it's this amazing thing. Like, that is the power of direct mail that no other marketing channel comes even close to.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Good examples. You talked a little bit about, curating based on your personas and, how you're doing that. Are you doing anything differently between, maybe a male and female audience, or, just the various personas you might have in your mix, besides, so that fintech audience that you're just talking about?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Rachel, one of the biggest things that we tell our team is personalization and customization trumps anything that you're sending. So making sure that you're taking the time to understand who is the recipient, what do they like, what's their like alma mater, or have they shared something about a dog? Like, it's so simple, but that goes so far. We hear a dog barking. Hey, they likely have a dog. Maybe we want to talk about the dog on the disco call. Now I'm going to follow up the disco call with something to surprise and delight them, like, a gift card to Chewy, or if they mention their dog's name, something with their dog's name on it. That goes so far. And when it comes to like different demographics, right? Like our Acro Swag box, we'll swap out certain things for a female key decision maker. And I mean, you just get that immediate, this was made for me. This was bespoke for me. And that just amps up the surprise and delight factor.
Yeah. I love that you do that from a personal perspective, but you're still able to do that at scale. Talk a little bit about how you're doing that. Like, how are you able to say, to do that at scale versus, having to do really, really one-off type things, which I'm sure you're still doing. Like you mentioned the Chewy things and stuff like that, but how do you scale some of that?
Yeah, I will say that we have some amazing Reb super users within the team, and we work with them. So our play, so that we can scale it properly and we can get the widest adoption, which again, we see the down funnel results. So the more that we utilize direct mail, the more revenue we're going to generate. Is we have an automated report every Monday morning that says, this is what we sent, here's who sent it, here's who it went to. And there's so much commonality between the personalized sends and the group sends. So in order to scale this up properly, you have to know a little bit about who you're sending to. So it takes the time to it's very difficult to have a high empathy task, which means it takes a ton of human intervention and something like this and automate it fully. So for us, it's like being able to pull information out of our gong calls, which is being populated or, put directly into our Salesforce, and just knowing a little bit more about the individual. So you can scale, at mass, which is kind of what the marketing team does for air cover. We're really, really good at that because our audiences, we play in, we just had a press release last week. We verticalized our business units. We're going specifically into mortgage tech. We're specifically going into SMB and consumer. And so within that, our audiences are very alike, and who is the persona we're reaching. So marketing can do it at scale, with air cover. And then we trust that our super users and everyone across the rep team is doing the very, very bespoke thing.
I love that story so much. And Julie's doing some great things over there at Acrolis. I love learning from her as well. All right. So we're proving direct mail with that human touch is still important. And I think it's becoming even more important. One of my other predictions for 2026, and I'll put out a full list of my predictions for 2026, but one of my others is that personal touch, that more intimate sort of brand experience for our buyers is going to become even more important and will just take off in 2026. But speaking of human touch, we also need other humans who are influencing our decision making. And as marketers, we need to find those influencers in our space that can help tell our brand story. And so we had Madhav Bandari on from Storytelling Network earlier this summer as well. This is another one of those underutilized channels in influencers. And he talks about the framework that they've used to develop a network of influencers that helps them tell their story and expand their story, and doing it in a way that's budget friendly. And he gave a lot of advice on that episode itself about how to implement an influencer program. So if you really want to know how to go do that, listen in on that podcast. But let's have Madhav tell his story here. What is your, what's the engagement with those influencers look like? How do you structure the deals? How are the contracts done? What does that look like for somebody who's like, I have no clue what that even would entail?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of things. One is we talk about the ownership of the content in the sense that's super important. You need to sign that, put it on a contract. That there's a lot of creators that are creating videos, or sometimes they might create a text post, and we want to use that as a screenshot in our LinkedIn thought leadership ads, right? So you want to make sure that, all right, do you have the permission to use that content? Can you use it the way you want it, right? So that's one thing that we absolutely do, that whenever they create that content, we sort of own it and we can sort of use it the way we want it, right? That's one. I think who owns the content is definitely one. The other is also like, can you run ads on it? Can you run, for example, can you run thought leadership ads from their profile, right? That can also work, right? Will they engage with your posts, right? So there's some strategic, perhaps product announcements you might have, or some sort of a big sort of milestone event in your company.
That's smart.
And you want to sort of get them to engage, right? So
yeah,
you can sort of put that in the terms. How many times is it, twice a month or whatever, right? Will they engage with the other influencers content that we can sort of create like this peer group, right? Or like, how many posts will they deliver? What will be the content, right? Is it going to be video? Is it going to be text? Is it going to be a mix of all of these things, right? I think all of this just gives a good sort of clarity. And then we also add, like, obviously that it's a 3-month sort of trial. And, after 3 months, like this will be whatever the total amount. And yeah, I think those are like probably
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't have to necessarily talk specifically about individuals, but like, what kind of investment are you making in this? Like, what are you paying somebody to do that?
Yeah. So it honestly ranges from anywhere from $250 to about $2,000. But I will say that that's the limit we've set for ourselves. Like, I said that I'm not going to spend more than 2,000, 2,500 per LinkedIn post, because the unit economics wouldn't make sense. We're kind of almost, I would say, like a bootstrapped company. Like, we just raised a pre-seed round, which we never really used much. So like, we're pretty, like, we're a profitable company. So we need to be efficient with our spend. So and honestly, like, I would also advise that this might be a little bit controversial, but some of the larger creators that charge quite a lot are just not worth it, because they don't put the same amount of effort. Their reach is pretty average. The content itself is like, they've over commercialized their content. So like, every post is an influencer post. Like, now the audience trust, right? That's a made issue with a lot of like these bigger creators. And so the best bets are on the micro and the nano influencers, I would say, right? Like, the sub 10,000, the emerging ones, the ones that'll just, punch above their weight, or like really just try really, really hard to make the post well. And those are some of our best performing creators, right? So that's why I think you can sort of look at the 250 to 2,000 mark. I would say the average comes to about $1,000 plus minus 500 is what I would say for most creators.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's great context. I think some people are probably thinking, oh my gosh, I got to spend so much, tens of thousands of dollars on a program like this. And what you're saying is not necessarily, right? Like, you can do it in a bootstrapped way.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I will say that the influencer costs are, I mean, this is what, like, we push for. Like, the influencers will come back to you with insane rates. Like, people always overinflate. Like, I'll tell you, like, there's one creator that reached out and was asking for $75K per LinkedIn post. Yeah. that's the thing, right? Like they'll just come with like these sort of insane amounts, right? And it's very common because there's no benchmark. There's no like, it's a very sort of like it's like a wild, wild west there right now, right? Like nobody has like these clear guidelines, but like I'm telling you this right now. So the best approach is you go to the influencer, you're like, this is our budget. Are you going to be okay with it? So that's the do it.
Wow. What an ROI that team is getting on their influencer ads. My goodness. If we could all get that from our LinkedIn ads, I think we'd be happy. So maybe something to think about. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening in all season in 2025 and this episode as well. It's been a joy to bring you the Rev Room this year, and I'm looking forward to all the guests that we have lined up and are brainstorming around in 2026. I think you'll be really excited. We're going to get really, really deep into helping marketers really evolve how we continue to implement this new playbook and get in front of our buyers in strategic and impactful ways. So if you have an idea for a guest or a topic, certainly we would love to hear that. So thanks for listening, and happy holidays and happy new year to all of you. Thanks for tuning in to the Rev Room today. We hope you enjoyed this episode. For more, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Don't forget to follow Inverta on LinkedIn for more updates and exclusive content. That's Inverta, INVERTA. Have a question or a topic you'd like us to cover? Reach out and let us know. Until next time, keep innovating and driving that revenue growth. See you next time.